Bro, I'm gonna keep it 100 with y'all, dude. Yo, make a grown man cry. This ain't gonna make a freaking grown man cry. That's what the Phrolova story did. The Phrolova story was so well executed, y'all. I mean, it started a little slow at the start there, but then once it started picking up, it really picked up. And all in all, this story was great because it really starts to piece the entire game together. There's some comments I want to go over as well from some posts that I saw that I want to try to discuss here and kind of lay down as to why this story is the way that it is and why the interactions are the way that they are within the story, and really lay down just how magnificent this story actually was. But first, be sure to like and subscribe. It helps out tremendously. Thank you very much. So in 2.5, we got the Phrolova story, which is a absolute magnificent piece that we needed for the story. There will be, I guess, a little bit of spoilers in here, but not really too heavily. I don't really like to give spoilers because I like people to experience it themselves. However, of course, given the context of the story and the significance of how the story was presented, of course, we have to discuss some things in here. But the Phrolova story was an absolute marvel of work. Now, it starts off fairly slow, about, I guess, like 10, 15, 20%. That first of the story, that first 10, 20% of the story, it's kind of slow. You know, you're kind of like, okay. But once you get to the Fabricatorium, it really starts to pick up, and then that's when you really start to just dive into things. So the thing that makes this story so important is that we get to see really the uncovering of the story start to full circle. So, you know, the game is in the first year that it's in right now. You know, it just has its 1 year anniversary. And I know one of the gripes that people had at the very beginning was that they couldn't really follow the story, or they felt that the story was sporadic, or just they couldn't really capture it or whatever. They could not understand that. I knew how this direction was going to go because this is pretty much the same for everything. You have to give it time to build. Any good story needs time to build because any good story is going to have very intricate weaving within it. Whereas if it's a bad story, you'll just get and understand everything right from the jump, which is not good storytelling. And now we are starting to see this full circle in here. During this Phrolova quest, you understand that there's a very tight connection between her and Rover, but yet the way that's presented is Phrovola's very much teeter-tottering on if it's actually there or if it's not. Rover doesn't actually know if it's there or if it's not. And that's the real deep thing that you start to see, because it unravels not only Phrovova's deep and very well written past, but also dives a bit deeper into Rover's story and what happened hundreds of years ago. This gets really good, and this gets really good really quick. Once you're in Fabricatorium, you really start to experience a new environment. You really start to experience a whole new world and a whole new gameplay sense, and it really brings into light Phrovova's connection with Rover as you progress through each area. Now, of course, you have these fancy scenes, like when you're going in between the energy pipes to get to the next area. You have the music playing. It's so well done, it has to be expected by Courier Games and Wuthering Waves. But what you really get as you're going through the story and going through these new areas is this connection building between Phrolova and Rover that is very unique to anything that we've seen before, because their connection is so interwoven in ways that we did not even begin to realize. Which brings me to this post right here that I saw on X, and that's what I want to dive in at. Is that it read, "I'm okay with the direction 2.5 went with Rover, showing flaws, but hear me out. My main gripe mostly lies with the execution of the scenes. It reminded me of 1.3 when Tethys put up a whole logical argument, and Rover just dismisses it with, 'No, shut up, you're wrong,' and wings it. And things just happen to work out in the end. It would have been nicer if there was a better debate. In a similar fashion in 2.5, instead of a dialogue exchange, we get more of a monologue instead, or Phrolova posits her beliefs, and Rover just gets 1 or 2 lines here and there. There's no flow in the exchange. Again, I'm okay with the outcome. I just think that the story flow and dialogue writing could be executed better. Still an overall excellent main story, and waiting for the closure for this. At least Phrolova is now on sabbatical leave." So this is the dialogue that they're referring to when they're talking about this. I'm going to explain to y'all why this is not what they believe it is, and why this is actually very well written. Because you have to really understand the context of the stuff to really understand it. And this is actually very well written, and it's intended to do so, to be written like this. And it's not the Rover being, it's not like, just they just say a one-liner, and it's just not well written. No, it's intended to be written this way to further and deepen the context of the scene and of the story. So we're gonna roll through here the Phrolova's parts. After all, even if you believe with all your heart, even if you wait patiently at a crossroads, the one you're waiting for may have long since forgotten you, forgotten the promise they swore to keep. By the way, this is obviously very much spoilers for those who, if you need to. Oh, hold up. Frolova continues. I waited for a long time. I won't wait anymore. Of course, we know who this is about. At this point, I should probably just be like, just say it straight up, because I mean, if you're still here, you're probably understanding. You probably did the story. You know what this is. But so now she's talking about Rover. What was once an unforgettable encounter between us can now be the thread that weaves a paradise for them. And then the Rover responds, "You've gone too far." That's it. Frolova, you're one to talk. How amusing. You with your long life and its endless possibilities, still choosing to start over, even at the cost of all your memories? Frolova adds, the irreplaceable bonds, the emotions that makes us humans are the brightest lights and most precious treasures in our fragile existence. Frolova, what madness, what cruelty, what impossible goal, what drives you to cast them all aside? You've gone further than I ever could. And then she concludes here, perhaps you believe more than I do, that only in endless time can true eternal perfection arise. So the commenter here, the original poster here who was talking about this, their issue was with this. The issue was with the Rover says you've gone too far. And I explained down here, I actually left a comment on here, and I explained to them the background behind this and why this is actually intended to be this way. So it's very simple, y'all. And this thing that people don't really understand about Wuthering Waves, and it's also one of the things that why people tend to say stuff like, oh, Wuthering Waves story isn't good, or Wuthering Waves story seems sporadic or whatnot. The reason why this is because this is fully intended to be designed in this way. And so this is my response below that I gave here. I mean, Rover doesn't remember her. This is what y'all have to remember, y'all. Rover does not remember her. So people are very easily seeing this, and then they get all the cutscenes that we get from seeing into Frolova's past. But that's Frolova's story. The Rover is not seeing these things that we, as the outside party, are seeing. So the Rover does not know these things that we know as the person who is consuming the story, of course. So like, you can't look at this and then expect Rover to respond in a certain type of way when the Rover does not know. As far as the Rover knows in the context of the story and where it's at, is that Phrolova is the enemy. Phrolova is the person who is involved with the Fraxidus. Phrolova is in cahoots with Christophoro and Scar and the likes, and is trying to trick him. Throughout the whole context of this main story, you saw that the Rover was questioning, oh, are you trying to trick me? He was very wary about trusting her because he does not know her. So you cannot expect him to respond in a manner whereas all of a sudden he's supposed to, reciprocate her feelings or whatnot. He does not know her. He does not remember. You have to understand that in the context of the story, y'all. My man does not remember. Quite frankly, the Rover likely doesn't even realize the weight of the words Frolova speaks. He doesn't. He's hearing it, but he does not understand what she is saying because his memory is gone. The Rover's memory is gone. So he cannot correlate their connection and the weight of the words that she is saying in the manner that she is saying it. Even when they're in the theater, he directly asked her, so was I here? And Frolova would not give him a straight answer. So he still doesn't know for sure if he even was there or not. But obviously we as the outside viewers here who are, consuming the story, of course we know. We can piece that together. But from being each of these characters, the Rover has no idea. So this is designed in this way, and it's great writing in that regard. And I further down here include that the biggest issue with Wuthering Waves story writing, which isn't an issue, it's just like, the issue that people have with it, is that it's extremely intricate. The storytelling is extremely well done in Wuthering Waves, but it's done at a deep comprehension level. The easiest way to think of this, I'd like to compare this, would be to compare it to Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex. This is a phenomenal anime, one of the greatest animes out there, but it is notorious for having people be like, oh, the story's too hard to follow. It's too confusing. It's too interesting. It's because the story is written at a very high comprehension level. So you have to have a very high it's pretty much like, it's like a paradise for an intellectual, pretty much. Like, I guarantee you the person who wrote the story, who's writing the story for Wuthering Waves, I guarantee you they're like a literature nerd. Guarantee you they're like a huge literature nerd, and they love really deep comprehension type of books, which I am more or less the same type of way, which is why it's easy for me to pick up on this stuff. But it's very evident that that's what you're seeing here with the story and how it's presented. It's also why I actually enjoy the story within the game. A lot of the times, like in these small little scenes where you might see some notes and stuff like that, you usually just skip it. Like you're running around and you stumble upon like a book and it gives up a whole wall of text. Normally people skip that, right? I always skip that in games like Genshin. But in this game, I usually read those because the story is so intricately interwoven that is actually very interesting to me. And I very much enjoy that about the game. But I wanted to touch on that because a lot of people, and like I said, it is one of the issues with the game. Because it's not like a Genshin Impact where you can just kind of hop in and you can easily catch on to the story because it's more or less dumbed down. The story is definitely more so meant to be able to be comprehended and to be followed by an extremely young audience. Whereas in the state of Wuthering Waves, it is 100% intended for a more higher level, like reading and comprehension and literature type of level of individual. 100%. And you can very much see that, and that's why sometimes you will see people say, oh, the Wuthering Waves story is so confusing and whatnot. It's not that it's confusing, it's just that it's very intricately done. Like I said, the best way to describe it, best way to compare it is with Ghost of the Shell standalone complex. That's literally the best way. Because if you've seen that series or if you've heard about that series, then you know it is a phenomenal series. It is a magnificent series. The music, of course, is composed by Yoko Kanno, who is one of the most, the greatest freaking composers out there for anime and stuff. Cowboy Bebop, Ghost in the Shell, Macross Plus, Escaflowne, all that stuff. But nonetheless, Ghost in the Shell standalone complex is a very intricate story. And a lot of times people get confused by it because it's a very kind of high intellectual story. Same thing pretty much with how the Wuthering Waves story is delivered. So I definitely want to touch on that. So that way, there was no confusion there. Because it's not as if, the Rover is just responding in a certain type of way for no reason. And it's just like, it's poor writing. No, they're responding like that because it is the appropriate response for that. You have no idea who this person is. You know if they're involved in an evil organization. You don't know if the organization is necessarily evil, but the fact is you presume they are, and they've been trying to come after you, been trying to hurt you, they've been doing crazy things, and all you know is that she's involved in that. You don't know y'all's history, so that is the appropriate response that the Rover gives here. As you would not expect any other response from that. But as a viewer, a lot of people see it and they're like, oh well, we know how close they are. We want them to be together. We want them so. But the fact of the matter is that they don't know that. The Rover doesn't know that. But nonetheless, Wuthering Waves has really been baffling because the execution of the story was extremely great because of its conclusion. Its conclusion was bro. I'm telling you right now, dude, that whole last scene when you're in the very last area, when the mirror's breaking, that whole last scene. Of course, I was streaming this live, so what I'm saying. It ain't gonna be no coming down my face, but I tell you right now, in my head, bro, I was holding back the emotions. Like that. That whole thing hit. That whole thing hit. You're gonna need a box of tissues. Like straight up, just letting you know, this thing can make a grown man cry. Like I said, it can make a grown man cry. That's how good this story was, and how well put together it was, and how unexpected it was. Absolutely masterful piece of work that I have to applaud to. Wuthering Waves continues to impress me. I'm not the type who just randomly shills and stuff like that. I'm like Laser. I'm very critical of things. And when I say that Wuthering Waves has a very quality and well thought and put together story, it's very intricate, I quite frankly mean it. Like I played all these other games. I still play Genshin. I just don't play I don't enjoy it as much. but I've been playing it since release. So it's not as if, I'm like, oh, well, this guy's just, lazy on Wuthering Waves because he doesn't like video games or whatever. No, I play Zenless and Sorrow. I play it all. And there's no ultimately better put together game than Wuthering Waves. Either those games. There isn't. Wuthering Waves by far has the most potential on every scape that the game has. Of course, the big thing with Genshin is that it's been out for, going on almost 5 years, right? So naturally, it has had time to build a heavy following and heavy lore that's gone with the game. So naturally, that has that going, of course, for it. But yeah, Wuthering Waves is definitely not to be messed with in that regard. But we'll see how the game is in 5 years from now. It's going to be quite the ride. It's going to be quite the story, and I'm looking forward to it. Anyway, y'all, I just want to discuss this and go over the story in this masterful execution and explain to y'all how the story works and why what you're seeing is what you're seeing and why it's so well written without you realizing it. Or, where you're thinking that they should react this way or respond that way. But they shouldn't, actually, to keep it accurate to the story and the writing. Anyway, y'all, be sure to like, subscribe, comment down below. Let me know what you think about this story, about Phrolova, all that stuff. And I'll see you on the next one. Much love. Spike content.